All right, so are you ready to dive into some relationship advice?
Always ready for that.
Okay, great. Well, today we're going to be taking a deep dive into a YouTube video
Okay.
by a relationship coach named Darwin McPherson. And the video is called
Uh-huh.
10 Most Dangerous Mistakes Men Make in Relationships.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen that one.
Have you?
Yeah, he's got some pretty strong opinions.
Yeah. He's not afraid to make some bold claims.
No, not at all.
One of the first things that he talks about is the importance of finding a partner who cooperates.
Right.
And he tells this story about a road trip with his wife where
Okay.
their truck broke down in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, geez.
No cell service, scorching hot, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And he uses this to illustrate what he means by cooperation.
And what does he say?
Well, he basically talks about how his wife just immediately jumped into problem-solving mode.
Okay.
She contacts the insurance company, finds water, even arranges for a rental car. All while he's still kind of like standing there trying to figure out what's wrong with the truck.
So she's the proactive one in that situation.
Yeah, very much so. So that's kind of his example of what a cooperating partner looks like.
I see. So do you think he's really saying that this is all about cooperation? Or is it just that his wife is incredibly resourceful?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like he's really emphasizing this idea of having a partner who is, proactive and solution-oriented.
Right.
Someone who can kind of like roll with the punches.
Especially when you're facing those unexpected challenges.
Exactly. And so he seems to be suggesting that, this type of dynamic where both partners are kind of like willing to step up and take initiative
Yeah.
is really crucial for a successful relationship.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not just about sort of, dividing tasks evenly. It's more about having a shared mindset
Yeah.
of tackling problems together.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, McPherson also, he's not shy about controversial topics.
Right.
And he actually argues that a woman's dating history
Okay.
can impact how moldable she is in a relationship.
Interesting.
So he introduces this concept of impressionability,
Okay.
suggesting that women with more relationship experience might be less
Oh,
open to change
I see.
or adapting to a new partner's way of being.
Oh, okay.
And he even gives tips on how to spot what he calls an unimpressionable woman.
Oh, really? Like what?
So he says, if she's constantly asking you to be more of something,
Mhm.
like more romantic or more assertive, that could be a red flag.
I see. So it's like she has these preset expectations.
Yeah, and I think what he's getting at, and this is where it gets interesting psychologically,
Yeah.
is that our past experiences shape our expectations in relationship
That's true.
and sometimes even create resistance to change.
Makes sense.
It's
Yeah.
like we develop these relationship patterns based on what we've encountered before.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily about a woman being set in her ways, but maybe more about her having already figured out what she does and doesn't want. Okay.
In a partner.
I could see that.
And those preferences might be influenced by both positive and negative experiences from those previous relationships.
Right.
Now, building on this whole idea of expectations, McPherson also talks about the link between compromise and leadership.
Okay.
And this is where things get a little more
Oh,
traditional,
okay. I'm intrigued.
So he suggests that a woman's willingness to compromise is tied to her ability to submit to a man's leadership.
Okay.
He's pretty upfront about his belief that a strong man needs to be able to make decisions,
Mm-hmm.
and a woman who respects him should be willing to support those decisions,
Okay.
even if it means compromising her own desires.
So it's a very traditional view of like gender roles and
Yeah, very much.
who's in charge. Yeah,
So this perspective definitely reflects a more traditional view of gender roles in relationships.
it does.
But it also raises the question of whether this dynamic is still relevant
Right.
or even healthy in modern relationship.
Mm.
Yeah, because is it really about submission, or is it more about finding a way to work together effectively where each partner respects the other's strengths
Right.
and, their perspectives?
Yeah. And maybe compromise isn't about one person always giving in,
Yeah.
but rather about finding solutions that work for both partners, even if it means making some adjustments.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance
Yeah.
that feels, fair and equitable for both people involved.
Okay, now get ready for this next one.
Yeah.
Because this is definitely one of McPherson's most controversial claims.
Okay, hit me with it.
He flat out says that men should not be comfortable with their partners having male friends.
Wow, okay.
He goes all in on this one.
Does he really?
He claims that the friend zone is a myth and that any male attention outside of the relationship can be detrimental.
So he's saying there's always an underlying motive or something?
Yeah, he seems to be suggesting that there's always a risk of those friendships turning into something more.
Wow, so he's basically saying men and women can never be just friends.
It seems like he's approaching this from a place of distrust,
Yeah.
assuming that there's always that risk.
Right.
But isn't that a pretty limiting view? I mean,
It is.
don't healthy relationships require trust and open communication?
Absolutely. I mean, having friends of the opposite sex doesn't automatically lead to infidelity.
Exactly.
Right.
It's about setting those healthy boundaries and being open with each other about what
Yeah.
feels comfortable.
Right.
And if you can't trust your partner to have friends of the opposite sex, that might signal a deeper issue within the relationship itself.
Absolutely. It's
Well,
about communicating those insecurities and working together to build that trust,
yes,
rather than trying to control your partner's social life.
exactly. So maybe it's not about eliminating opposite sex friendships altogether,
Right.
but about finding a way to navigate them in a way that feels secure and respectful for both partners.
I think that's a much healthier approach for sure.
All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that probably resonates with a lot of people out there,
Okay.
both men and women: nagging.
Yes, the classic nagging.
McPherson argues that while men are natural problem solvers, they can't solve a problem if they don't know what it is.
True.
He uses this analogy of a man trying to fix a broken appliance without knowing which part is malfunctioning.
Okay.
He says constant nagging without a clear problem to solve just leads to frustration and emotional exhaustion.
So it's like spinning your wheels without getting anywhere.
Exactly, and I think this goes back to communication styles.
Mm-hmm.
You know, McPherson seems to be describing a situation where one partner is expressing dissatisfaction
Yeah.
or frustration, but not clearly articulating the actual problem
Right.
or what they need from the other partner.
So it's not that men don't want to help, it's that they need like clear, actionable information
Yes,
in order to be effective problem solvers.
exactly. It's about shifting from vague complaints to specific requests
Right.
and focusing on solutions rather than just dwelling on the problem.
I like that approach. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where healthy communication comes into play. Both partners need to learn how to express their needs effectively and be open to hearing each other's perspectives.
For sure.
Now, McPherson calls this next mistake the most dangerous one men make, and he says it's something society doesn't want men to know.
Ooh, okay, I'm listening.
He claims men value respect over love
Okay.
because a woman can love you and still be disrespectful.
Interesting distinction.
He even argues that a disrespectful woman is more likely to be disloyal even if she claims to be in love.
So he's saying respect is a more stable foundation
Yes.
than love.
He's really emphasizing that a woman who truly respects her partner won't betray him, even if she's not feeling particularly loving
I see.
at a given moment.
Interesting.
So he's basically saying that respect is what keeps a relationship strong when the initial honeymoon phase of love kind of fades.
Right. It's like the deeper level of connection.
Yeah, it does make you wonder, though, about the relationship between love and respect.
It does.
Like, are they mutually exclusive or can they coexist?
That's a big question.
Right. And it might be helpful for listeners to reflect on their own relationships
Yeah.
and consider whether respect or love holds more weight for them personally.
I like that.
Okay, let's move on to a topic that's sure to spark some debate:
Okay.
McPherson's take on finances and lifestyle compatibility.
Right.
He argues that men shouldn't try to keep up with a woman's lifestyle if it's beyond their means.
Okay.
He even uses this phrase, dating with a calculator,
Dating with a calculator, huh?
and encourages men to assess a woman's maintenance costs before getting serious.
Interesting.
He gives this example of a man with a modest lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
you know, apartment, one car, financially stable,
Yeah.
encountering a woman who wants, you know, frequent outings, designer bags, a second car travel,
Okay.
maybe even a stay-at-home lifestyle with multiple kids.
Wow, that's a big difference.
And he argues that if the man's income can't support this,
Yeah.
he'll end up in financial strain trying to meet her demands.
So it's about being upfront about your financial situation and expectations early on.
Yeah. He also encourages women to be realistic about what their desired lifestyle costs
Right.
and to seek partners who can comfortably provide that without undue burden.
So it's about finding a partner who aligns with your values and priorities.
Yes, both financially and otherwise.
Right.
But it's interesting how he frames this entire discussion, wouldn't you say?
It is.
He seems to be operating under the assumption that men are always the primary providers in a relationship.
Which, is not always the case.
And that's not always the case in modern relationships where many couples share financial responsibilities more equally.
Right.
So while his advice might resonate with some people,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to finances and relationships. relationships.
Absolutely. What works for one couple might not work for another.
Exactly. And the key is to find a dynamic that feels fair, sustainable, and supportive for both partners.
Right.
All right, get ready for this one because McPherson considers this mistake to be literally the most dangerous one of them all.
Yeah, bring it down.
And he claims other relationship coaches won't talk about it.
Ooh, juicy.
He calls it accepting a woman who remains hypergamous during the relationship.
Hypergamy. All right, let's unpack that.
Okay, so for our listeners who might not be familiar with this term,
Yeah.
hypergamy, in simple terms, is the tendency to seek a partner of a higher social standing or desirability.
Yeah.
And McPherson argues that while hypergamy can be helpful in the initial stages of selecting a partner, it becomes a problem if a woman doesn't learn to settle down once she's in a committed relationship.
I see.
And he contrasts this with what he calls hypogamy in men,
Hypogamy, okay.
which basically means being open to partners who are on a similar level or even a bit lower on the social scale.
Interesting.
So he's suggesting that men are naturally less driven by status when choosing a long-term partner.
What do you think about that idea?
It's an interesting claim. I mean, do you think there's any truth to the idea that men and women approach relationships with fundamentally different motivations when it comes to status and ambition?
It's definitely a question that has sparked a lot of debate
Yeah.
within the field of evolutionary psychology.
Right.
And while there might be some biological underpinnings to these tendencies, I think it's important to remember that every individual is unique.
Yes.
And our behaviors are influenced by a complex interplay of factors,
Right.
including social conditioning and personal experiences.
Absolutely. So while McPherson might be onto something when he talks about these tendencies, it's probably not as black and white as he makes it seem.
Definitely not.
Now, getting back to McPherson's argument about hypergamy,
Yeah.
he believes that a woman's hypergamous instinct
Okay.
can lead her to constantly seek a better option even when she's already in a relationship.
So she's always looking for an upgrade.
Yeah, and he uses this term monkey branching to describe this behavior.
Monkey branching. Okay.
Moving from one man to the next without ever settling down. And he seems to believe that this is especially problematic when a woman starts to decline from her peak value, but still holds on to those high expectations.
So she's not meeting the market anymore, so to speak.
Right, and he argues that this leads to a sense of FOMO?
Fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out, which can drive women to infidelity.
I see.
He suggests that women who cheat are often already thinking about the next man they want to be with,
Okay.
someone they perceive as being better than their current partner.
So he's painting a pretty bleak picture.
It's a pretty cynical view of women's motivations in relationships, wouldn't you say?
It is?
It definitely raises questions about his underlying assumptions about women's nature.
Definitely.
But it also makes you wonder if there's any truth to the idea that some people, regardless of gender, might struggle with commitment and the fear of settling.
That's a good point.
Right? So it might not be just about hypergamy. It might be about individual personality traits or insecurities that can affect anyone.
Right.
All right, so we've unpacked a lot of McPherson's advice so far.
We have.
And it's clear that he has a very specific perspective on relationships.
Very specific.
It's a perspective that definitely emphasizes traditional gender roles and a certain hierarchical dynamic between men and women.
It does.
And while some of his claims might feel outdated or even offensive to some listeners,
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that we're simply exploring his perspective, not endorsing it.
Right. We're just trying to understand where he's coming from.
Exactly. Our goal is to present you with a range of viewpoints
Yeah.
and encourage you to critically analyze the information you encounter, especially when it comes to something as complex and nuanced as relationships.
For sure.
Now, before we dive into the rest of McPherson's advice, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've covered so far.
Okay.
What are some of the key takeaways that stand out to you?
Well, I think one of the most interesting things about McPherson's approach is this emphasis on finding a partner who's cooperative
Yeah.
and solution-oriented.
Yeah.
It's something that's often overlooked,
Mm.
in the initial stages of a relationship, but it can be so crucial for navigating those inevitable challenges.
Right. And I found his discussion of communication styles to be really insightful.
Yeah.
That analogy of the broken appliance
Yeah.
really highlights the importance of being clear and specific when communicating your needs
Absolutely.
to your partner.
It's about moving beyond those vague complaints and focusing on solutions.
Exactly. And I think his advice about setting healthy boundaries,
Yeah.
both in terms of finances and opposite-sex friendships, is worth considering, even if you don't agree with his specific recommendations.
Right. Finding that balance is key.
Now, I know some of McPherson's claims might have raised some eyebrows,
They have.
especially his views on gender roles and hypergamy.
Definitely a very traditional perspective.
But I think it's important to remember that we're simply presenting his ideas for you to consider.
Right.
And it's up to you to decide what resonates with you and what you choose to disregard. All right, we're going to dive back into McPherson's advice and explore some of his other controversial claims.
Looking forward to it.
So stay tuned for more insights and thought-provoking discussions.
Can't wait. Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about hypergamy.
Yeah, McPherson's got some.
And, it's an interesting concept to think about.
It is.
But we should probably add a little note of caution here.
Yeah, what's that?
Exploring these concepts can be kind of interesting, but hypergamy is one of those things like a lot of evolutionary psychology ideas.
Yeah.
That's often oversimplified.
Okay.
And even misused.
In what way?
Well, to justify, controlling behavior.
Yeah.
You
Oh, I see.
Yeah, saying, oh, well, women are just naturally hypergamous. So.
That's a good point, yeah. We definitely don't want to give the impression that we're endorsing any kind of stereotyping or limiting of women's choices in relationships.
Exactly. Every individual is unique. And while these theories might offer some general insights, they don't dictate everyone's behavior.
Right.
So it's important to approach these discussions with nuance and avoid making sweeping generalizations about entire genders.
Absolutely. So let's move on to another piece of advice that McPherson offers.
Okay.
He talks about the importance of finding a partner who values all the qualities a man brings to the table equally.
Okay, interesting.
So he specifically cautions against ranking those qualities.
Like what kind of qualities?
Like physical appearance, personality, character, fitness,
Okay, yeah.
and so on, in some kind of hierarchy.
Gotcha.
He believes all these traits should be valued equally.
So, for instance, a man who prioritizes fitness might find a woman who's also physically fit more attractive.
Yeah.
But a man who doesn't care as much about his own fitness might be less concerned with his partner's physical appearance.
Right, but McPherson's point is that problems arise when one partner starts prioritizing certain traits above others. So he uses this example of a woman who might focus so much on developing her character, being kind, supportive, nurturing, that she neglects her physical appearance.
Okay.
And he seems to be suggesting that this creates an imbalance, that a truly high-value woman
high value.
is one who is well-rounded and pays attention to all aspects of herself, both internal and external.
It's interesting how he ties this back to the concept of a high-value woman.
Right.
It almost implies that a woman's value is determined by her ability to maintain all these desirable qualities in perfect balance.
Yeah, it definitely raises some questions about what truly defines a person's value.
It does.
And whether it should be based on a checklist of traits.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on this idea of equal valuation?
Well, I think it's worth considering whether focusing too much on any one trait at the expense of others can create a disconnect in a relationship.
Okay.
It's about finding a partner who aligns with your values and priorities, where you both feel like you're bringing your whole selves to the table.
That makes sense. It's not about being perfect in every area, but about striving for balance and authenticity.
Exactly.
All right, McPherson then moves on to another topic that can be a bit tricky to navigate.
Oh?
Communication.
Oh.
Particularly when it comes to expressing dissatisfaction or frustration.
Right.
He argues that men need to set clear boundaries around a woman's communication style.
Okay.
Especially regarding nagging and complaining.
The nagging again.
Yes. He emphasizes that while men are natural problem solvers, they can't solve a problem if the woman isn't able to clearly articulate what's actually bothering her.
I see.
So he paints this picture of a man listening to his partner vent over and over again,
Yeah.
but without a clear solution in sight.
Just complaining.
And he says this leads to emotional exhaustion and disconnection for the man who eventually just tunes out.
Oh, he just checks out.
Yeah, that's a communication pattern that can be really damaging to a relationship. It's important for both partners to learn how to communicate their needs effectively
Yeah.
and to avoid falling into a cycle of complaining without offering any solutions.
You got to be solution-oriented.
Right. It's not about suppressing emotions or avoiding difficult conversations,
Yeah,
but about finding a way to express those feelings constructively.
I agree with that.
And that might involve taking some time to process those emotions before bringing them to your partner,
Right.
or focusing on specific behaviors rather than making sweeping generalizations.
Good advice.
McPherson uses the term emotional disconnect
Okay.
to describe what happens when one partner feels like they're constantly being bombarded with negativity without any clear path to resolution.
Yeah, it just builds up.
He believes this can lead to resentment, withdrawal, and ultimately a breakdown of the relationship.
A slippery slope.
He suggests that men set clear boundaries around this type of communication, making it clear to their partners that they're willing to listen and help, but only if the problem is clearly defined. And there's a willingness to work together to find a solution.
It takes two.
So it's interesting how he frames the man's role as the fixer in the relationship.
Yeah, like he's supposed to come in and save the day.
He seems to be implying that men are wired to solve problems and they need clear, actionable information in order to do so.
So it's like a very traditional view of like men are the problem solvers.
Yeah, but it also raises a question about how we approach communication in relationships. Are men always expected to be the problem solvers, and are women always expected to be the emotional expressors?
Right, it's not always so cut and dry.
Those are important questions to consider. I think it's crucial to recognize that communication styles vary widely,
They do.
and these generalizations might not apply to everyone.
Right.
The key is to find a way to communicate effectively as a couple, regardless of gender roles or expectations.
I think that's key in any relationship.
Absolutely. It's about understanding each other's communication styles and finding a way to meet in the middle. Now, McPherson's next piece of advice touches on a topic we've already discussed:
Okay, which one?
lifestyle compatibility. But this time he focuses specifically on finances.
Right, back to finances.
Yeah. He reiterates his belief that men shouldn't try to keep up with a woman's lifestyle if it's beyond their means.
Okay.
He emphasizes that a woman's desired lifestyle needs to align with a man's financial capabilities.
Makes sense.
He even suggests that women should vet men based on the lifestyle they desire
Vet men, huh?
and date accordingly.
Date accordingly. Interesting.
So he argues that modern women often expect men to elevate their lifestyle
Okay.
to meet their desires,
To meet their desires. Gotcha.
which can put a strain on the man's finances and lead to resentment.
So it's like a mismatch of expectations.
He uses this analogy of a woman wanting to upgrade a man's system,
His system?
his current lifestyle, to fit her preferences.
Oh, interesting.
And if he can't afford it, he's either forced to split finances 50-50 or completely reconstruct his life to accommodate her.
So he's got to like level up.
It's a perspective that definitely highlights the potential for financial incompatibility to create tension and conflict
For sure.
in a relationship.
Money is always a tricky subject.
And it goes back to his earlier point about dating with a calculator,
Right.
analyzing a woman's maintenance costs before getting serious.
It's a pretty transactional way of viewing relationships, wouldn't you say?
It is. It seems to reduce compatibility to a matter of financial alignment.
It does.
And it assumes that men are always the primary providers.
Right, which we already talked about.
Which, as we discussed earlier, isn't always the case in modern relationships.
Not at all.
So it's important to note that McPherson is speaking from his own perspective and experience,
Yeah,
and his advice might not resonate with everyone.
definitely not.
It's up to each individual to decide what factors are most important to them in a relationship
For sure.
and to choose a partner who aligns with those values.
Absolutely. There's no one size fits all.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to relationships. And what works for one couple might not work for another.
Exactly.
The key is to find a dynamic that feels healthy, balanced, and fulfilling for both partners.
I agree.
Now, this next piece of advice from McPherson touches on a topic that often triggers strong emotions:
Okay.
dealing with a partner's past relationships.
Baggage.
He specifically cautions against dating a woman who hasn't fully moved on from her previous relationship.
Okay.
So he suggests that if she's still talking about her ex,
Yeah.
comparing you to him, or holding on to anger and resentment,
Yeah.
it's a sign that she's not emotionally available for a new relationship.
Red flags.
He even uses the term baggage to describe this emotional residue from past relationships.
Baggage, yeah, we've all got some.
And he argues that this baggage can weigh down a new relationship and prevent it from flourishing.
Right, like carrying extra weight.
He believes that everyone has a past, but it's crucial to make sure that past doesn't overshadow the present. So wouldn't you agree that it's important to enter a new relationship with a clean slate, emotionally speaking?
I think it's healthy to have processed those past experiences
Yeah.
and learned from them.
Right.
But it's also important to be aware of any lingering emotional attachments or unresolved issues that
Yes.
could impact a new relationship.
He suggests that if a woman is constantly bringing up her ex,
Yeah.
it might be a sign that she's not over him
Still hung up.
or that she's using him as a measuring stick for you.
Ah, that's not good.
It could also be a sign that she's seeking validation or trying to make you jealous.
Some games.
Whatever the reason, it's a red flag that warrants further exploration and open communication.
Definitely.
He emphasizes that men shouldn't feel pressured to fix their partner's emotional baggage
Oh, that's a good point.
or compete with the ghosts of her past.
Yeah, you can't fix someone else's problems.
He believes that it's each individual's responsibility to work through their own emotional issues
Right.
before entering into a new relationship.
You got to do your own work.
It's about recognizing that you can't change someone's past or force them to heal.
Right.
You can only support them on their journey, but ultimately it's up to them to do the work.
It's their journey.
So it sounds like his message is to be mindful of the potential impact of past relationships and to proceed with caution if you sense that your partner haven't fully moved on.
Protect yourself.
Exactly. It's about protecting your own emotional well-being
Yeah.
and making sure that you're both entering the relationship from a place of emotional readiness.
I like that.
Now, McPherson then dives into a topic that can be particularly challenging for men to navigate,
Okay.
dealing with a woman's emotions,
Oh, boy.
especially when those emotions are directed at them.
Right. Men and emotions, not always a good mix.
He acknowledges that men are often uncomfortable with strong emotional displays,
Yeah, we tend to shut down.
and that they tend to shut down or withdraw when faced with a partner who is upset or angry.
The classic fight or flight response.
He calls this the fight or flight response.
All right.
And he argues that it's a natural instinct for men to either try to fix the problem immediately or escape the situation altogether.
Just get out of there.
But he suggests that this response, while understandable,
Yeah.
can be counterproductive in a relationship because it doesn't address the underlying emotional needs of the partner.
You're not really listening.
He encourages men to develop what he calls emotional composure,
Emotional composure. Okay.
which is the ability to remain calm and present in the face of a partner's emotional outbursts
That's this cuff.
without becoming defensive or dismissive.
Right. Just stay grounded.
It's about learning to listen actively,
Yeah.
validate her feelings, and offer support without feeling like you have to solve the problem immediately.
So it's about shifting from a problem-solving mindset to an empathy mindset.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that sometimes the best thing you can do is simply be there for your partner.
Just be present.
Offer a listening ear and provide emotional support.
Right. Sometimes that's all you need.
He argues that men who develop this emotional composure are more likely to create a safe and secure space for their partners to express their feelings openly and honestly.
So she feels heard.
It's about building trust and intimacy by demonstrating that you can handle her emotions without getting overwhelmed or shutting down.
That's a good skill to have.
That makes sense. It's about being a supportive partner rather than a fixer or a rescuer.
Right. You're not there to fix her.
Exactly. And recognizing that sometimes just being present and empathetic is the most helpful thing you can do.
Absolutely.
Now, McPherson's next piece of advice might seem a bit counterintuitive,
Okay.
especially in the context of modern dating culture.
All right. I'm intrigued.
He cautions men against being too available for a woman,
Oh, interesting.
particularly in the early stages of dating.
So like playing hard to get.
He argues that men who are constantly texting, calling, and making themselves available at a woman's beck and call can actually make themselves seem less attractive.
Less attractive, huh?
He uses the analogy of a scarce resource. Okay.
Suggesting that things that are easily obtained are often less valued.
So the harder it is to get, the more you want it.
He believes that by creating a sense of scarcity, men can actually increase their desirability
Interesting.
because it sparks a woman's curiosity and makes her wonder what else he's doing with his time.
So he's got a life outside of her.
So he's basically saying that playing hard to get can actually work in your favor.
It's a classic dating strategy.
It seems like he's advocating for a more balanced approach to dating, where you're engaged and interested, but not overly eager or clingy.
Right. You got to find that sweet spot.
He suggests that men should focus on their own lives, hobbies, and passions.
Yeah. Have your own thing going on.
And only make themselves available for dates and interactions when it's convenient for them.
Don't bend over backwards.
It's about conveying that you have a full and interesting life outside of the relationship,
Right.
which can make you more intriguing and desirable.
So you're not just waiting around for her. It's interesting because this advice goes against the grain of what we often hear in the context of modern dating,
It does.
where responsiveness and constant communication are often seen as positive traits.
Right, like you're supposed to be glued to your phone.
But McPherson seems to be suggesting that a bit of mystery and intrigue can go a long way
A little bit of mystery.
in creating attraction.
Yeah, I do that.
Now, before we move on to McPherson's final piece of advice,
Okay.
I want to touch on something that's been woven throughout his entire video. This concept of masculinity
Okay.
and what it means to be a high-value man.
High-value man. Yeah, he uses that term a lot.
He emphasizes traits like strength, assertiveness, decisiveness, and financial independence.
So very traditional masculine traits.
Very much so. He
Yeah.
seems to be advocating for a return to more traditional values of masculinity,
Oh.
where men are the providers, protectors, and leaders in their relationships.
The alpha.
It's a perspective that's sure to resonate with some men who feel like those traditional values have been eroded in modern society.
Yeah, there's definitely a segment of men who feel that way.
But it's also important to acknowledge that this vision of masculinity can be limiting.
Right.
And even harmful for both men and women.
Absolutely. It puts a lot of pressure on men.
It can create pressure for men to conform to unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
And it can reinforce harmful stereotypes that can damage relationships.
Is that healthy?
It's crucial to remember that there are many ways to be a man,
Right.
and that healthy masculinity encompasses a wide range of qualities, including empathy, vulnerability, and emotional intelligence.
It's about being a whole person.
Absolutely. It's about finding a balance that feels authentic to you and allows you to be your full self in a relationship.
I agree with it.
Now, McPherson's final piece of advice focuses on a topic that's often considered taboo:
Okay. What's that?
forgiveness, particularly when it comes to infidelity.
Oh, that's a tough one.
He poses the question, can a man ever forgive a woman for cheating?
Big question.
Now, he doesn't actually reveal his own stance on this issue in the video,
He doesn't.
but he does dedicate an entire separate video to exploring this topic in more depth.
So it's a cliffhanger.
It's a clever way to keep his viewers engaged and coming back for more.
It is. He knows how to keep people watching.
But it also raises questions about his motivations
Yeah.
and whether he's genuinely trying to help men navigate the complexities of relationships or simply using sensationalized topics to generate views and engagement.
Could be a bit of both.
That's something for you to consider as you reflect on his advice
Okay.
and decide what resonates with you and what you choose to disregard.
Always be critical.
It's important to be discerning consumers of information,
It is.
especially when it comes to something as personal as relationships.
Absolutely. Every relationship is unique.
Exactly. And there's no one-size-fits-all formula for success.
No.
What works for one couple might not work for another. And it's important to find a dynamic that feels authentic and fulfilling for both partners.
That's the key.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Darwin McPherson's advice,
Oh, yeah?
we encourage you to continue exploring these ideas
Yeah.
and forming your own opinions.
Don't just take his word for it.
Don't just take his word for it, or our word for it, for that matter.
That's right.
Do your own research. Talk to trusted friends and family.
Yeah.
And most importantly, listen to your own intuition.
Your gut feeling.
Remember, relationships are a journey, not a destination.
It's a process.
There will be ups and downs, challenges, and triumphs.
That's life.
The key is to approach those challenges with open communication,
Yeah.
mutual respect, and a willingness to grow and learn together.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been fun.
We'll be back next time with another exploration of thought-provoking ideas and insightful perspectives.
I was looking forward to it.
Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep those relationships strong.
Cheers to that.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've been unpacking Darwin McPherson's advice, and
Yeah, lots to think about.
it's been a lot. So in this last part, let's wrap up with those last couple points from his 10 most dangerous mistakes men make in relationships video.
Okay, sounds good.
We were talking about his perspective on masculinity and that cliffhanger about forgiving infidelity.
Right. Those are some pretty big topics.
And they both kind of point to the bigger picture of his advice.
Yeah, how so?
Well, it seems like he's pushing this very traditional view of relationships,
Okay.
with men as the leaders, women as the followers.
Yeah, you could definitely see that.
Almost like he's saying men should try to have all the power and control.
And some men might like that idea.
Yeah, maybe.
But it's important to remember that healthy relationships are really about equality and respect, not about one person dominating the other.
Absolutely. It's about teamwork.
Exactly.
Working together, not just one person calling all the shots.
Now about that question about forgiveness after infidelity.
Yeah, what about it?
There are just no easy answers there.
Nope.
Every situation is just so unique.
Right. So many factors to consider.
Like what exactly happened?
Yeah, the context of the whole relationship.
And if both people are even willing to work through it.
It's not about following some set of rules or doing what society expects.
Right.
It's a really personal decision.
It is.
It has to feel right for you.
And it might even be helpful to talk to a professional.
Yeah, like a therapist.
Someone who can really help sort through all those complicated feelings
Absolutely.
and figure out how to move forward.
Now, before we finish up,
Yeah.
I want to go back to something else McPherson talks about.
Okay, what's that?
This idea of men taking care of themselves.
Putting themselves first.
He really emphasizes that
Okay.
men shouldn't sacrifice their own happiness
Yeah.
just to please their partner or fit some societal expectation.
Right. Like be true to yourself.
Exactly. He wants men to go after their passions, stay healthy, mentally and physically, and build up their self-worth.
So they feel good about themselves.
His thinking is that those guys, the ones who are confident and happy,
Yeah.
they're the ones who'll have the best relationships.
Makes sense, right?
It does. When you feel good about yourself,
Yeah.
you project confidence and you attract people who like you for who you are.
Exactly. You're not looking for someone to complete you.
And you're not depending on your partner for all your happiness.
Right. It's about being a whole person.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Darwin McPherson's advice, I want to leave you with a few things to think about.
Okay. I'm listening.
First, remember, there's no one right way to have a relationship.
Right. Everyone's different.
What works for one couple might not work for another.
Exactly.
You gotta find what feels authentic and fulfilling for both of you.
Absolutely.
Second, don't be afraid to question any advice you hear.
Even if it's from an expert.
Even if it's from an expert, do your own research.
Okay.
Figure out what you believe.
Yeah.
And trust your gut.
You're into it.
And lastly, relationships are a journey, not a destination.
A journey. I like that.
There'll be good times and bad times, challenges.
Ups and downs.
The key is to face those challenges together.
Yeah.
With honesty, respect, and a willingness to learn and grow.
Couldn't agree more.
So that wraps up our deep dive into Darwin McPherson's advice. We hope this got you thinking and maybe even inspired you to keep exploring your own relationships. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.